Welcome to People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. Joining me today is my sister, Michelle Carstensen. Our conversation has two focal points. First is some of the biggest challenges and adversity that she has faced in her life. Later, we turn the tables and Michelle asks me some questions that help explain my current situation in life. And in the Being Wrong segment, we learn why Michelle thinks she was wrong about college. Please take a few moments to leave a rating and a review of People I Know Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Search for and follow People I Know Show on Facebook or Instagram to see photos and other content related to the show. There's now another listening option. All episodes are now uploaded to YouTube, audio only, but you can listen there if that suits you best, and see other videos that I'll be posting from time to time, including the one from 2 episodes ago with Jean Lepola. Again, just search for People I Know Show. Now, to today's conversation with my big sister, Michelle Carstensen. On today's episode of People I Know Show, I'm joined by my sister, my big sister. I don't have any little sisters or little brothers, so I have a big brother and a big sister, and my big sister is Michelle Carstensen. Thanks for being on People I Know Show, Michelle.
Thanks for having me, little brother Curt.
So as I'm navigating my way through the different people I know and how they impact me and how they influence me, I try to figure out, because sometimes the people, I barely know them, and I find it super interesting then to ask someone who I don't really know that well all kinds of questions I don't know the answers to. But for you, I know you so well, I probably know a lot of the things about you. But then I think, there's some things about you that we don't really talk about that I think would be interesting for me and for someone that knows you well and might be listening, or maybe some random person that happened to find People I Know Show on one of the podcast apps. So what I think, Michelle, is going through life, you've had to deal with some difficult things that some of them I know you've learned a lot from, and some of those things I think people could learn from you about. So as I think back to your life, and you can definitely add in here and there, I remember a time when I was a kid. I was about 9 years old, maybe 11 or 12. I'm not exactly sure. But my big sister, who was in high school, 10th grader in high school, I think, you suddenly had a major medical thing that just kind of went from being Michelle sick to Michelle might die, basically. And take us back to that time.
Yes, I guess I do remember that time back. I think that was my sophomore year. Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was my junior year in high school, actually. One night I actually, if you want to hear a little bit of the story, is I got very sick, but we weren't sure what was wrong with me. And back then my parents I think they had health insurance or they didn't have very good health insurance. So my mom said, well, just take a warm bath and we'll go in the morning because it'll cost too much money to go to the emergency room. Now think back, this was probably like 1996. So I do believe we did have health insurance, just really high deductible. By the time I went in the morning, it was kind of a blur because I was very, very sick, and they immediately rushed me to the hospital in St. Cloud. I had what was called, my kidney was blocked or actually not functioning. So I went from being a healthy junior in high school to within a day almost dying. So my kidney was infected because we found it just wasn't formed the way it should be. But it was so infected because we waited so long that it had grown like 3 times its size and nearly exploded. And of course, if you do know or do not know, if your kidney explodes, you will die. So they rushed me in the hospital in St. Cloud. At that time, they put a stent in it. They told me in a month, come back in. We'll take the stent out and probably repair it. And this is something some people in my life know about this, but they don't know the percentage of chance. So I'm not a person that gambles on percentages, because I remember at the time they told me and my parents that it would be a 96% chance they'll just fix it and 4% they'll take it out when I was going into surgery. Well, when I came out of surgery, I no longer had a kidney. So when somebody tells me it's 99% chance and 1% chance, I lean not to believe the 99% chance, although the medical field is a lot different now, so they would probably know better nowadays. what that was actually happening. And back then, a long time ago, which was 22 years ago, they probably didn't know as much as they knew now. So
I suppose, and I now that you say that, I do recall that something like that happened where that wasn't the expected result, but it ended up being the case, so you had to have it removed. You certainly weren't feeling as well as you wanted to, but with even maybe with you doubting the percentage, you must have not thought that like your life was in danger. Or did you, when you went to surgery, were you really worried that, something horrific was going to happen?
When I went into surgery, I knew that they'd either take it out or leave it in. Of course, I figured that they would leave it in. But with that, like, I wasn't as sick as I was the day I went to the hospital when nobody knew what was going on. Well, not at my house, but once I got to the hospital, they immediately knew what was going on. But it seems like it's one of those things, like, up until that point, we had no idea that I had a non-functioning kidney, basically. And what the doctors tell me now, like, we can go on from that part of what happened years later, is that when my mom was pregnant with me, and nowadays they can tell this, but the way she was carrying me, it was not allowing my organs to develop the way they should. And nowadays they watch that through ultrasounds and stuff, and they can correct the positioning of the babies apparently while they're in the womb, like by moving them along and stuff. But back then they couldn't do that. So I basically was born that way with 2 not so great kidneys. Now I have 1. And if we can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, let me jump ahead.
So this happened when you were
16.
16 years old, and then you went back to normal. The next year, you went back to playing like high school basketball, and you were probably like a rising high schooler, going to be like really, really good. But then you had to miss like a whole season, right?
Yeah. So back then, I mean, we went to high school in Browerville, so it's a lot different than where my kids go to high school at Hopkins. But back then, I played 3 sports. I was okay at all of them, I believe. I mean, I would always consider myself, depending on the sport, like the 6th man, and I got to play a lot in everything I did, but I had to miss, early that year I broke my finger and had to miss volleyball, and then I had to miss basketball, but they did allow me to play softball that spring, but I didn't do very good because I was totally out of shape and still not feeling very well. My senior year, I came back and was able to play all the things, and also they basically said you could play anything, do anything, and then come about 16 years later, so when I was 32 years old. So back then they said you could have kids, do anything, you'd be fine with 1 kidney because, again, they didn't have the tests they have these days. So they told me I would just be fine, which I was fine until basically exactly 16 years later when I got sick again. I remember I went to work and I felt really sick. And basically, I mean, when you have a kidney infection once in your life, you're very much more prone, and maybe before this or after this, prone to getting bladder infections, where, some people are prone to getting bladder infections, some people aren't. But if you get a bladder infection after you had a kidney infection, you have to be very aware of it, because that could mean that you're getting another kidney infection, and that's not good when you only have 1 kidney. So I remember back then, when I was at work, I was not feeling very well. And I thought, well, I'll just go home and rest and see if I feel better, and took some medicine. I think I stopped, and I think at the drugstore, they have medicine that you can take if you think you have a bladder infection. So it's actually a good thing to talk about, because I've always wanted to educate people on this. So sometimes when you're prone to bladder infections, you could be also prone to kidney stones, other kidney infections, which can lead to serious things because your kidneys are vital, serious organs. So at this point, I wasn't feeling good at work. I went home and I was like, oh, there's definitely something wrong. I drove myself to the emergency room at night. And I remember calling one of my friends. I was like, I don't feel good. I'm driving myself to the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room. They ran some tests. It was like the worst pain. It was like as bad, if not worse, than having children, which as women, any women, that's not very, it's very painful. And guys would only know if they have had a kidney stone, how bad and how painful it is. Well, the ER doctor at that time figured I had a kidney stone. So he's going to give me some medicine and send me home. And I was like, nope, you better check with a kidney doctor. And here again, so my urethra was like, my ureter was plugged. And so my kidney was not functioning at all. And he sent me home on that day, I probably would have died again. Just from even that the medical fields are obviously better now. Like, again, not all doctors know what they're dealing with, especially ER doctors, because they're dealing with so much. So at that time, they sent in up to my kidney again. And a month later, had surgery to repair it, which my kidney doctor at the time, which I still go to, said they do that surgery about once a year. It's not very common. It's just not really something they do. So they had to repair it, and they say now, like, it should be good to go. But they also say, like, I'm not supposed to use bubble bath and not supposed to go in the ocean. I'm not supposed to ride horse. I'm not supposed to ride snowmobile. Like, really limited to what I'm supposed to do now that I not only have one kidney, I have the kidney part's functioning, but not everything necessarily by it is functioning as well as they would like. However, now that I'm about 6 years out of surgery, they said that it should be good to go for as long as it should be good to go. But again, on my percentages, I'm the one that looks at it as like, I'm not sure that is true, but I try not to worry about it too much. But it is a good thing to educate people on. Like, a minor bladder infection, if you think that's what you have, and you probably do, could be actually something really a lot worse. So you should get them checked out.
So you said it was 6 years ago, and you go how often now to make sure everything's okay? And will you stay on that course forever?
So I'd go once a year to see my kidney doctor and then have a renogram. And it's been really good since then. And he said that I no longer have to go to him and that I will be good. And if anything comes up, obviously call them. So
you're not going to go get it checked out anymore. The only time you'll ever have it checked out again is if you feel like something's wrong.
Correct. Like, if I have signs and symptoms of a bladder infection or something in that area, I would obviously have to get it checked out. I've actually never had a bladder infection since my second surgery. I've had one since my first surgery, and that was probably due to it was eventually getting plugged and getting worse. But I've never had one since my second surgery. So,
to me, I guess if that's how they handle it, they know what they're doing way more than me. But it sounds like, as you tell these two stories, that you didn't know you had any problems the first time until like the day before it got really serious. And the second time, the same thing. So if you don't check it anymore for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe, I guess, hopefully it's okay. But if something's getting worse, you won't know it until the day before it almost kills you.
Basically, that's what it sounds like. Well, they said it's like in between 2 and 5 years, as long as the surgery has worked between then and they can tell from the tests it's working, that it should work. But also they put me on, which I kind of follow, don't really follow. They don't put me on a plan, but with potassium and protein, like, I'm not supposed to eat that as much as a normal person can eat because of that scenario. So
would you say that the kidney issues has been like the biggest thing you've had to deal with in your life, or are there other things that jump into your mind now and you think about if you've had other things that you've struggled with or dealt with that you feel like someone maybe can learn from your story?
I feel like the kidney thing was the scariest thing, and overall, like, I know that it could have killed me and it can still kill me or be something that would be stressful on somebody else. Like, remember when we went into the doctor and he said, I'm going to take your kidney and pointed at you and Chuck, because if I need one, that's where he's getting it from. Although we don't even know if we'd be a match. Like, that fear is in me that someday I'm going to have to get a kidney transplant, and that's kind of scary. But until that happens, it's not the end of the world. But I'm also only 39 years old.
Well, I have 2 kidneys. They're probably both good. And I guess if you need one, you can have one, Michelle.
That would be the scariest thing. There's also been other things in my life that some people know about and some people don't. And I mean, I guess there's a lot of things that have happened to me. I don't know specifically what would help people more than other people. I mean, I look at it a lot of times and I think it's more of a thing that's more relevant that people are okay to talk about. As far as like when people have anxiety, which I think everyone has anxiety. Some people keep it really simple and don't talk about it, and some people do. The biggest thing for me when I was growing up, I was more, and I think this kind of runs somewhat in my family, and they say that this grows with people, is I was like super OCD, which I'm not anymore. But I think there's a lot of people that are OCD and don't even realize what they're doing is really OCD.
So obsessive compulsive disorder, but you didn't realize you were, and what made you learn that you might have been or were?
So when we were, how old were we? I don't remember. So some people may know this and some people may not like to talk about this, but our grandpa committed suicide. I don't remember what year. Do you remember what year?
2005, August 1st, I think, 2005, but go on.
Yeah. So that's some people know that, some people don't. When people talk about it and then all of a sudden like, holy cow, I didn't realize that happened. It's back then, again, it wasn't as, I don't know if it happened as much as it does nowadays, or it wasn't broadcasted as much. Yeah,
I think there was a huge stigma over suicide for a long time when people didn't understand that there's like mental illness. There are, different levels of things that we don't know about people because they keep it so hidden and they don't know how to communicate it. And now that it's becoming more common that, people are struggling and they see this as the only answer. And his grandpa probably saw that as the only answer for whatever reason. Now we can understand that better. But I don't think it was, people would whisper about these things probably, but now who knows the result in someone in his situation's life. But now that more people are aware that this is a possibility for people, you might be able to have a different conversation that leads to something better. But at that time he did what he, I guess, thought was the best solution for his own sanity. And you, I think, had as bad as anybody maybe had some repercussions from that, trying to make sense of it all and dealing with your situation, right?
Yeah. So I think on your show before, you've talked, at least with my brother Chuck, about going to Michael Burnoff, an experience that we go to. So if people are listening, listen to the podcast with Chuck about Michael Burnoff, or if Curt has talked to you about Michael Burnoff, this will all come to fruition when we talk about this story. So when my grandpa committed suicide, that's when I started to learn about what I was experiencing in my life growing up, what it all was, which was, for simplest terms, OCD due to a phobia I had that I no longer have and I no longer live with. But this is a good thing to talk about again, because I don't know how many people you have in your podcast that have actual real phobias or have had them. So
none that I know of so far, but I guess I haven't asked anyone.
That could be the people I know show, like, what phobia do you have? No. So that's when I learned about it. So we don't really have to go deep into that. That's when I learned about what I had. And people around me that would go on vacation with me or go places with me would understand what I had. But if you didn't know me and we went somewhere, so my phobia was, I don't even know the exact word. It wasn't fear of me dying. It was a fear of dead people, which I can't remember what it's called exactly. I've tried to Google it many times, but it has a word for it. But I was kind of afraid of dead people or things to do with dead people, I would suppose. And that haunted my life until about 4 years ago. Was it 4 years ago? You didn't go with, did you, at that time?
Necrophobia is a specific phobia, which is the irrational fear of dead things, corpses, as well as things associated with death, coffins, tombstones, funerals, cemeteries.
Yes, that's what I had.
Okay, go on.
So that was a real thing, or I thought it was a real thing. Apparently, there is something psychologically to do with fear of dead things. So I grew up basically since I was about in kindergarten with this fear, which I think my parents knew and you guys kind of knew, but
and we'd make fun of you. Bad. We'd drive past the cemetery and I don't know. I think growing up, we didn't really understand any of it, but we made fun of things that we shouldn't have made fun of at all. It really maybe slowed all of us down in some ways, but go on.
Well, because we just didn't know. I mean, yes, they would drive past the cemetery, not on purpose, but when they do, I would hide under the seat because I could not look out the window. And they thought it was funny, but it was a real thing in my mind. If it wasn't real, it was a real thing in my mind that I grew up with since I was, literally in kindergarten. And I lived with it until I was about 35 years old. So I spent most of my life being in fear of going to funerals, basically dead people. I couldn't, museums, anything like that. I've gone in them, but not without complete anxiety and not wanting to be there until I had a phobia cure done on me, which actually works. So if you people out there are living with a phobia, if it's a fear of snakes or spiders or I don't know, there's all kind of phobias and I would never pick on you for them. I'm not saying I wouldn't laugh for a second because I laugh at myself now. I even laughed at myself during it. You didn't realize how worked up and how twisted in your mind you can put something just from a peak emotional experience, which I know everybody listening's had a peak emotional experience due to something.
And those you have, if you remember anything that you wished hadn't happened, it's probably a peak emotional experience. And maybe in rare cases, something that was really great that happened, but a memory associated with the emotions attached to it that allow it to stick in your memory much stronger than the average day-to-day things that we all forget.
Yeah, right. So, and the problem with the peak emotional experience that happened, it happened by my grandpa. And then when he committed suicide, that all just brought everything I thought I could bury as I grew up. It just all like blew up with me. And then, of course, I put it away for a while again and realized this is something until we came across Michael Burnoff, which there's other people that do these phobia cures as well. I was even scared to have him cure it because I was living with it so long. It was just like part of my identity. So getting rid of part of my identity would be like, now what can I tell people if I don't want to go to a funeral? Now I can't use this excuse.
No more excuses, Michelle.
So basically, he found the root of the problem pretty simply. It was probably a 20-minute fix and got me to understand basically that when that peak emotional experience happened with my grandpa, he basically forced me to go look at his dead mom in a coffin when I was like 5. So if something like that, somebody forced you to touch a snake or climb up to the top of a silo and was laughing because it was really high and you're scared of heights, anything like that, it's not really real, just but you don't know that until you have somebody fix it for you.
So since it's been fixed, do you have any indications that it's still there at all? Or is it just everything, you feel like you're probably like a normal person now when it comes to those topics related to the necrophobia?
I think I'm normal now. I mean, if I could say examples, like when we go on vacation now, I can go to things that I didn't want to go to before and it doesn't bother me as much. I'm just like most people. I still don't like going to funerals. Doesn't mean I like going, but I will go. But just like I would be scared to like on vacation, like I said, go to museums, go to things that I knew were part of really past history would not be something that I would like at all, basically. So, I mean, I show houses now, like you'll probably tell people, but I am a realtor. I show houses now and I know in some of the houses somebody's died in it, all that stuff, and it doesn't bother me at all. Of course, the people aren't personally attached to me either, which although we've had our other grandpa die since, and it wasn't so bad for me as I thought it would be. And to be honest with you, like I go into my grandma and grandpa's house where my grandpa used to live, the one that died recently, and it doesn't bother me at all. So.
And previously, prior to getting this phobia released from your mind,
there's no way in hell I would have went in that house.
You just wouldn't have gone there anymore.
No.
Have you been back to the other house that now one of our cousins owned that the other grandpa killed himself in?
No, not inside. I still think that's a different scenario that I wouldn't want to unless obviously I needed to. So.
And yeah, we're siblings and I grew up not with any of this. I think when it came to death, I was more, no one's excited about it, but I'm at this point in my life, I realize that's inevitably the end to all of our lives. So it's something we're all going to have to deal with from time to time. And I try not to think about it until it happens. And then you deal with it and you move on. Because every time it's happened, I've been able to move on pretty well. Whereas for you, obviously, it wasn't something you could move on from at all for a while. So yeah, after that incident in 2005 with our grandpa, there was a long stretch of time there where you're like really tough mental shape, if I recall, coming off after that. Yeah.
And that was to do not necessarily, I mean, if somebody commits suicide, that's very, very close to you. It's probably going to put most people in tough mental shape. But the majority of mine, what I figured out was because I also had that phobia, which made it even worse for me to accept again because of how it all started and the connections with that.
And I'll change topics here, but kind of around that same time, You got married very young, if I recall.
Yeah, I was married when I was 20.
And had your first child about a year later, right?
When I was 21.
And then a second child 2 years later.
Yep.
And divorced about 3 or 4 years after that? Not even?
Yeah. I was only married 6 years. So about 3 years after my second child was born.
And I think still at that time, too, I mean, divorce was becoming more and more common, but still it maybe was more of a stigma then even. And now I feel like 12 years later or 13 years later, it's like no one bats an eye if someone goes through that and that's the reality of a situation, which is, very common, unfortunately, I suppose, but it's the reality of the modern world that's something that more and more people are dealing with. But when I guess we'll skip all the reasons for that, but coming out of that, like you were adjusting to having 2 kids that were with you most of the time and just kind of figuring out your life again. What was that like?
So I was divorced at 26 with 2 little kids. I think they were 1 and 3 at the time, or 2 and 4. Can't even remember. I mean, I guess we could figure out the math, but it's weird how you just forget things. The kids think, my kids now, they're in high school and they think that they're going to remember every little thing. I'm like, no, you'll forget most of everything because you just don't remember unless it's like something super important. You just don't remember. Yeah. I mean, I was 26 years old, a single mom, and had the kids, 95% of the time. That wasn't very normal at that time, which you're saying it is more normal now. It is. I was always a person that was like, I'm getting married, I'm never getting divorced. Yeah. I mean, that's what I think a lot of people say.
They ignore the math. Like everyone thinks their situation's so great, I suppose. But if you're aware that half of first marriages end in divorce, whatever the number is, it's somewhere in that range. To think that you're definitely on the 50% that's not going to, I think that's irrational. No matter how good you think your situation is, clearly 50% of the situations don't work for whatever reason develop later. So, yeah, anyway, go on.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the reasons we got married is at the time they didn't think I could have kids either. And that was not because of my kidney stuff. And I mean, I don't need the whole world to know every medical thing that could be possibly wrong with Michelle, but apparently.
Well, the whole world's not listening. Some of the world listens to People I Know show, but if the whole world starts listening, it'll probably be good. That means one of these episodes will be really, really, really popular.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, they thought I had endometriosis. So they said either, again, in medical field back then, they said if you either we'll put you on testosterone so you don't have to have kids for a while, or you should have them right now. So we just had them right now. Which I don't know what they do nowadays when you have that, but I see the commercials on the ladies that have endometriosis. So apparently I didn't have it bad enough not to have kids. But because of like the stuff that's happened in my life with my kidneys and stuff like that, one thing I don't regret, obviously, is having the kids when I was physically healthy enough to have them. And so glad that I had them. And yes, I lived as a single mom, and I still continue to live as a single mom. But I don't feel like I've always had to raise my kids on my own because I've had other people there to help me. But it was weird being 26 with 2 kids and being a single mom. And
then you were living close to our parents, and were you farming at that time? I guess you were.
Yeah. So
Michelle was a dairy farmer, cow milker lady at one point in her life.
Yes.
Turned realtor now.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that rather be self-employed than working for someone. But I used to be a dairy farmer. I raised my own cattle and did really well for that, and was working with my parents at that time. And I think we milked for a year or two, probably a year after that, until I realized that wasn't going to work. So we sold the farm. Being a single parent, that didn't work so well, milking cows.
But the kids got to hang out in the cold and with the farm animals for a while.
Yeah. I mean, even though they were super young, I still think that they learn the work ethic of a dairy farmer. And I've always, anytime I've ever gone and brought my resume and applied for a job, when they saw I was a dairy farmer, I get the job every time.
But you'll never have to do that again, maybe. If you can be realtor forever, you're not going to have to use your resume, Michelle. So what good does that do you anymore?
I don't know. But apparently dairy farmers work harder than other people. So.
Oh. Well, I should start putting that on my resume. You did that for a few years, and then why did you decide that you didn't want to do that anymore?
Because my parents sold the farm, so I couldn't.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But that all kind of led together, right? I mean, you all were getting kind of sick of it. That's hard work, right?
It's really hard work, and we didn't have the buildings to hold the cows, and especially when it was like 60 below zero in the winter, there's no way you could hold the cows when you didn't have a building. They wouldn't stay warm. So it is very hard work, and it's an everyday, twice a day job, and you can't not milk the cows. So we figured on it wasn't working out. So they sold the farm, and I left and started working for about a year, and then I went back to college, which I didn't think I would ever do. And I know you have the thing on your show about something you're wrong about. That would be the thing that I was for surely wrong about.
Okay, then we'll keep that as a teaser to the end of the episode. We'll learn about what's been going on since then. So you went to Mankato for that.
Yep.
And I mean, it did. So you bought a house. So you had this big giant house shed in back in our hometown of Browerville, and then you went to Mankato and you bought maybe the world's tiniest house that wasn't officially a tiny house. It was like some other person's second little guest house, and you bought it as your own house. And did that, I guess, as we kind of conflate a couple things here, did that play into you, like knowing that you bought this house and then sold it for some extra money, I think, afterwards? Did that play into you eventually deciding to kind of not pursue what you had pursued in college and become a realtor?
No. So basically, this is funny because it comes up a lot in real estate is people say, well, it's going to be hard for me to downsize from 2,000 square feet to 1,700. And I said, well, I had 3,200 square feet and I downsized to 600 square feet. So
that's a big move.
That was a big move. So the realtor part comes along. Well, I went to school for sports management, which I realized with 2 kids in elementary that wasn't a profession that would work out for me after college right away, because when you go into sports management field, you start at basically minimum wage, working about 70 hours a week, and that's not at home. So having 2 kids, if I would put them in daycare after school or whatnot, would not have been feasible for me to be in that field. That is why I'm not in the sports management field. The real estate stuff came along right before I went to college in Mankato. I wanted to take real estate classes because our brother, Chuck, of course, was in real estate. Signed up for a course and it got canceled because I didn't have enough people to go through the course. So I actually was going to go in real estate. I considered it highly before I went to Mankato.
And not that you can control the way things worked out, but would you say at this point it was better it went the way it did for you to get a more well-rounded education?
I mean, I went for sports management and marketing. So a lot of sports management is learning how to market. And that time, social media was barely coming along. I mean, there might have been Facebook that nobody used. And I helped the program become better at using social media. And that's how I independently learned how to use social media marketing, which is one of the highest forms of marketing today. So going to school and networking people and learning the stuff I did does help me in my current position.
And you've been doing the real estate for how long now?
Over 4 years, almost 5 years.
And in 4 or 5 years, what do you like about it? What are the biggest challenges in that career?
The things that I like about real estate the most is I've always been a person that worked in customer service. I like working with people. I also like looking at houses. I want to buy half the houses I look at, which isn't allowed. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an interior designer of one of my things. And I like looking at other houses to see how people build them. And plus, working with people and the schedule that I can run. When you're self-employed, with, again, being a single mom with 2 kids that are in everything, being able to get them to where they have to be works a lot easier. Being self-employed in real estate, that actually works out a lot.
So what's the most difficult things about that gig?
Most difficult thing is the thing I talked about. I like being in customer service and working with people. But as you know, working in any job, people are difficult to work with sometimes.
So you're saying you're difficult to work with?
Sometimes they're probably difficult to work with. But I mean, it's no different than I've worked in retail And most people are amazing to work with. And even if they're not, it's just learning how to communicate with people because everyone else has different personalities than you do and getting them to the destination that they want. I mean, buying a house is one of the biggest things they will ever do. And yes, you might do it 2-3 times, but especially like your first time, it's one of the biggest purchases you ever make. That's something that puts you into debt more than most things do because you have to live in your house. You want to help them make the best decisions and the choices for themselves. But helping them understand that is not always what they want to hear. Some people just want certain things and they're not able to afford it, but you have to help them understand that where they are currently and what they're going to get when they buy a house is not something that don't have to be there forever. Sometimes it's just a starting point.
So let's see. Okay, let's stop here. And so if someone is actually ever in need of your services, we'll let you market yourself here briefly on People I Know show before we continue with the conversation. How does someone find you if they're looking to buy or sell a home in the Twin Cities or anywhere in Minnesota, really, I suppose?
Right. Yep, anywhere in Minnesota. I'm actually on a team with my brother and my cousin and another gal, the Carstensen team at Remax Results. You can find us at carstensenteam.com or mnhomeshop.com. And you can email us at carstensenteam@gmail.com. And we do market all over the Twin Cities and basically all over Minnesota because we do have 4 agents located in 4 different cities.
So what else did we learn over the years, Michelle? Any questions for me since I've been asking you? Like, I don't know if you're familiar. Like, as I started this project a couple of years ago, and I guess one time we recorded something, but this exists. There's a podcast called StoryCorps that there's a lot of this where people talk to each other, people that maybe don't have these types of conversations. And none of this that we talked about today is so out of line from what we talk about. But it's great value, like, to have that going forward. And like my friend Josh, who I've had some conversations with, I look back at it, it's like, this is so amazing that I still have this. It makes him feel, he's not alive, but it makes him feel alive in ways that are pretty special. So, well, questions for me? I didn't prep you on this, but if you have any.
Any questions? I can ask you any questions.
You can, ask me anything.
Hey, audience, what do you want to know about Curt? No, I'd say I look at it, and my daughter's a senior in high school now, and she's like, oh my gosh, I might have grandkids in 10 years. I might have grandkids in 5 years, and I suppose I could have grandkids in like 9 months. But growing up with you, I always thought that I would have lots of nieces and nephews, and Chuck has 6 kids. Not 6.
4.
Chuck has 4 kids.
Wait, did Chuck do a DNA test recently?
Yes.
Or what?
No, Chuck has 4 kids. Can't remember. But I always thought that you would have kids. And because you spend so much time with my kids, is that why you don't have kids yet, Curt?
No, so and then there's probably a lot of layers to this, but when I saw both you and Chuck get divorced after having kids at young ages, that made me super hesitant to take that path. It's like, this did not work for Chuck or Michelle. I mean, you all have amazing children, and as years go by, the ex situation, I think, gets much better overall. But just dealing with that seemed like a terrible way to go forward. Like, if I would have followed that same path and done the same thing, I felt like that would have been idiotic. Like, if I would have gotten married young, had kids, and it not worked out, it's like, if I can't learn from you two doing that and on the things that you struggle with, I must not be paying attention in life. So I really was thinking it's something that has to be really perfect for me to do it. And maybe I've kind of held to that same standard of nothing's been perfect to the degree that and it's never going to be perfect, obviously. So maybe that's another reason why I'm not married and no kids. But the first thing I remember is just seeing you and Chuck go through that and thinking, no, that's not a path forward for me.
So is that your peak emotion experience? Is that your phobia, fear of having kids and getting divorced?
I don't think it's a fear. I just don't think it's wise. I think, and now as I've gotten older, I realize people at that age, when you're in your young 20s, I mean, maybe you might be with someone that you're happy with and things work out. But there's so much growth that happens as a person. If you like are trying to grow in any ways from age 20 to age 30, let's say, maybe that's like once you're in adulthood, that's like definitely where you're going to really change a lot as a person. So to make a life decision somewhere near 20 and expect it to stand true and be correct for your life, for me, the way I see things, it's like, no. I mean, it could, but more likely than not, you're going to be wrong. You're going to have personal growth. You're going to change. And not that it's going to be a bad experience in the sense of it wasn't worthwhile. You didn't learn anything. It wasn't part of your growth. But to expect what you want from your life at 20 or anywhere near that age to be precisely what you want much later and for everything to work out the way you thought it would when you're imagining your fantasy life, I just don't think it's realistic. So I just kind of let time pass until I feel like I'm confident I know what I want, and the person I'm with is someone that might allow things to actually go well long term. And maybe there is some sort of, I don't think it's a phobia, but maybe there's some sort of stigma attached to that now for me, which makes it much more difficult to get there. Plus, I think when you guys were getting married and having kids at a young age, that was kind of the normal thing to do. Small town Minnesota, that wasn't uncommon. But as the world has quickly changed, it's very much not uncommon to not get married young, to not have kids young, and especially in like a faster paced environment. And now it's so easy to meet new people. This seems to be less likely, and the environment's less suitable to make those decisions and commit to them. And I guess I don't commit very easily to much of anything still.
True. But now you're 35, you're almost 36. So you're not between 20 and 30 or between 20 and 35. That's how old you are. If you look at the next 10 years and the way that people mature as they grow up, you would think that within the next 10 years, for sure, if not within the next 5 years, you'd certainly know what you want and could still have kids. Because here's the thing, that you're probably right, because majority, for sure 51%, but I'd say more like 75% of the parents in my kids' grade are old enough to be my parents. I would say it's probably 25% that had the kids at my age. Most of them are in their 50s, if not even in their 60s, of the kids that are graduating with my daughter this year. I would say it's 75%, 25% that they're much, much older than me. So I think that was more of a small town thing to get married super young, not as much as if we would have grown up, let's say, in a metropolitan area.
And yeah, you mentioned my age, and I do think about it like that. There's probably two ways to do it for me, and certainly it's going to happen differently. But either have kids young. I guess if you're going to have them kind of young, just have them young. So you're approaching 40 in a couple of years, you're going to be empty nester, and you'll still be very young and have this. You'll have both the youthfulness plus also a better financial situation, I suppose, and you'll be very free to do a lot of things while still being young, because the kids won't need you on a day-to-day basis. So you've got that to look forward to. I guess meanwhile, I will have used, let's just say I have a kid at 40. I will have used my 20 through 40 age where you were, less free to do what you want. And I was much more free. And for the last 5 years, I think especially, I've been doing a lot of things that probably couldn't have done if I had kids. And by the time I'm 40, I'll be in a position where I think, hopefully both financially and mentally, that if I do have kids, I'll still do some of those things and I'll find ways to do them. I built up these habits and what's important to me that I think can still work out. But if I have kids young and don't have a lot of money, then I'm pretty much strapped to do what I've been doing and raise the kids and move on. But now I find that I'm so much wiser than I would have been at the age that you had kids. So hopefully, like I was around your kids 6-7 years ago a lot, or whenever beginning about 7 years ago, I started to be around them quite a bit. If I was in an okay, above average role model type guy. I would imagine by the time I have kids, the things that I know that I wasn't very good at back then with them, I'd hope I'm a really, really, really good parent from like nearer day one than I would have been if I was trying to figure it out on the fly as a 21-year-old, for instance.
Possibly. But I still think at any age when people have kids, they think they know what they're getting into until they have to spend 24 hours a day taking care of them.
And maybe. But now, like for a few years, I didn't think I wanted kids. And I was like, nah, if I don't have them, that's probably the best thing. But now I look at the world and I think the world needs children born to parents that are super purposeful, that the reason they're having kids isn't just to kind of do what people have done forever, is to find someone, procreate, and kind of just keep the DNA going. Like if I was to have kids at an older age of my life, it's because I want to raise them in an environment with especially the purpose of, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to spend my time and my money and everything to do this. I'm going to do it as well as I am absolutely capable of, and enter it with that purpose. And maybe everyone does do that, but I feel like I didn't have that mentality before, where like if I'm going to have a kid, the world's going to need a lot of kids that are raised in a way that somehow they can be the people that lead this world, lead humanity to exist, because there's a lot of challenges that are going to face these next generations that people before us didn't face. And I really think that would be the purpose, to have kids, to make sure that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it as well as possible. So it's not one of the things I'm doing. It would be, I guess, purposeful. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but to me, I feel like I'd never thought about it that way until recently.
Yeah, I know you said you used to not want kids a few years ago, and now I know recently you've kind of changed that as well. I feel like I should be the one. I should podcast and interview Curt all the time, because I'll ask him the questions and make him answer all the questions that nobody else will ask him.
Well, that's fine. You can ask, keep asking if you want. Your kids are having a bonding thing right now, going to the gym and at the local YMCA, and so we got no noise in the house, because when they get home, it'll be loud.
It'll be very loud. You'll know when they come in. I guess when like I was growing up, I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And then I think by the time I hit tech school, I was like interior designer, restaurant manager. What did you really want to be growing up compared to what you are right now?
That was, I suppose, a problem. I never, like when I was a little kid in second and third grade or whatever years they'd go through, and they'd have the video camera. I think they did, the big old video cameras back then. What do you want to do when you grow up? I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Like a few of the kids did, and everyone wanted to be an athlete. And like I had no reason to think that I wouldn't be the greatest baseball player of all time, because, why not? I'm just some kid with no great athletic skills. But I didn't know that at that time. And well, I ended up quitting baseball after the ninth grade. Maybe I ended up playing golf, maybe in grades 9 through 12. So maybe after eighth grade, I quit baseball among quitting other sports, and kind of took a different path. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So Chuck was a sports broadcaster. And that's what he wanted to do. And then I ended up getting into that because I just kind of tagged along for a while. And then I had developed enough knowledge of that job that I ended up doing it, and did pretty well at a certain point, probably, or at least I was not bad at it. But I never really wanted to do that. I guess the more I did it, I developed maybe a desire to go far in that, but I didn't have the right determination to really make it in that. And the first time I went to college, it was for finance and credit management at Alexandria Tech College way back when.
Stuck with that. She did economics.
I mean, you say should have, but I didn't really care for it. So I wasn't passionate about anything very much. I guess about sports in different ways. And I worked in sports broadcasting and sports and other capacities through most of my 20s. But then at a certain point, I realized I wasn't passionate about that anymore either. And that's why at about age 30, I had to hit the reset button on life. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I tried different things over the last 5 years, a lot of traveling, meeting different people, dating different women, and just getting to know different people from different places. And it began to emerge that I was changing a lot. And then as my ideas and thoughts and beliefs and just the structure of my thoughts when I look at the world had changed a lot, then I guess this podcast idea began to develop, that I feel like I've learned so much that I want to tell whoever wants to listen and have these types of conversations and different types of conversations and see what that could do for me, because still, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to sustain a career where I'm really helping people. But when I look through job postings, nothing jumps out at me. I mean, travel related jobs, customer service jobs like I can do because I can enjoy meeting people. But I guess maybe that's a struggle, that I don't have this undying, unwavering passion that gets me jumping out of bed every morning to go do whatever that I know some people have in some cases, but that's never been me. So without that, I'm trying to find ways that I do really care about things and try to make an impact in any way that I feel like I can.
Yeah, I don't know. I just asked that question because it comes up a lot, when you have a senior and a sophomore in high school. Like, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I mean, realistically, we know that the highest percentage of people won't do what they go to college for when, 10 years after it. That's
because you're forced to make a choice that you're not ready to make. And there's no reason that you should be ready to make. Yes, some people probably are, or maybe not. I don't know if they are. Maybe they are, but they make a choice that they stick with because they did like it enough and everything kind of goes the right way. And maybe some people feel obligated to stay in whatever they did. But like you said, you were, never really pursued then what you went to college for. I did a little bit. And now I guess some of what I learned is coming back for me, feeling like I could do a podcast and had the basic skills to do that. I carried those over, but I don't really use much else specifically from my mass communications radio broadcasting major. I didn't use it for a number of years. And your daughter, as we were talking before we started recording, about to graduate high school and go into a university right away. And if I was back in that situation again, what I absolutely would do is go somehow make enough money to be okay for a while and then go travel somehow. Maybe not at age 19. Maybe go get some generals done if you're going to need that anyhow, but then take a break, go travel, go do something, go be far, far away from home and really learn about yourself. That's what I would have learned. I learned these things at age 32 instead of age 20 or 22. I could have maybe saved a decade if I did it earlier. And I think a lot of people go through situations when they get older where they need to find themselves again. And maybe that happens all the time, because I never really found myself when I was younger. I waited. I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do or thought I liked and just kind of kept going on this path that I once started on because I didn't know any other path. And then finally that path came to an end. And then it was, now what? Well, I had to, start over again at 30. And I'm doing fine. I don't have any struggles. I really don't. I mean, maybe some mental things that I think about that as we all probably have things that come back into our mind a lot, and we try to figure out whatever we're dealing with. My life's fine, but if I just do what I'm doing, I feel like I'm not doing enough for the world in some way.
Right. But see, I kind of disagree with you, because had you stayed with broadcasting and got better than what you were and got a big job, you probably would still be doing that. It just depends. So I would look at it I went to college and then I stopped and went back 10 years later. And there's some people that should probably not go to college right away and some people that should. And it probably just depends on the situation. But again, raising teenagers is not something you've done before. And if we tell them the experiences we have and we shouldn't do this, they'll do the opposite of any experience we tell them to, because that's how they are. And that's how we probably were too. If our parents told us to do something, we were probably not going to do what they told us to do. Maybe initially, but then we were going to change.
Yeah, I know there's definitely stages of that in life. The thought that occurred to me is when I was in high school and at tech college for that 1 year, and then I actually took a year off and worked at the local radio station back home, and then continued on in the radio broadcasting type of field. During most of that time of my life, my objective when I was in school was to get A's, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do, is get A's. Keep getting A's, Curt. Oh, you're doing so good, whatever. And I think maybe that's somewhat normal. I don't know. I don't know what other people's experiences are, but never did it occur to me, or was it reinforced to me, that the purpose of going to school is to learn. Learn everything you can. If somehow you get bad grades, it doesn't matter as long as you learn something. That would be my advice to anyone that's that age. So for your daughter and then your son in a couple of years, do they have a great desire to learn? Because if you go to college without a great desire to learn, there's too many distractions and you're not going to learn enough. And then 4 years later, you're going to have another year and a half left, or you're going to just change majors or something like that. If you haven't developed a desire to learn, I see no point in going to a higher education place and paying them money to teach you things you're not all that interested in learning. So I think going to a university can and should be important for the right people at the right time, but that's for people that are eager to learn and eager to make an impact in some way that they know that university can help them with.
Did we grow up in a different house? Because I was not expected to get A's, and actually my parents told me not to go to college. So I feel like we probably didn't grow up in the same house.
I don't think anyone expected me to go to college, except I was a smart kid. Like, I easily got A's. It came too easy for me. I don't think things were challenging enough for me. No one figured out how to tell me how to be properly challenged and be eager for those challenges, because it could have gone differently, I suppose. But that wasn't the environment. And I feel like I had a lot of potential that was kind of wasted for a while because I didn't learn to try that hard. And maybe that's just the nature of who I am. And I have learned that in some capacities, but it's still not like, like I said, I was at 30 years old and trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I'm 35 years old and slightly more figured out what I want to do with my life. That maybe it's just not in my makeup to have some of these things that some people have. But I know your kids well. I don't know them enough at this moment, but I really hope them and anyone else that's about to go spend tens of thousands of dollars over the course of years at some education, university or college or whatever they're going to, they better really want to go for educational purposes. Yes, there's social aspects that are important, and you kind of missed that because you went to 1 year of tech school and then you didn't go for years, and we can get into that in just a minute too. So there's important social things to figure out while you're at campus. But if you're learning all those things and not really caring about your classes and spending all this money to learn how to make different friends and join different clubs and learn how to party and function the next day, it's an expensive lesson to learn that maybe could be done without the actual classes on your schedule.
Right. But I think part of college is the networking that you gain if you use the college experience to your advantage. Is the people that you network with might either be your friends for a long-term period of times, or might be the people that you need down the road in business connections. So I think that's part of college, if you use that to an advantage and don't just sit in your dorm room and hide.
Yeah, I think your first job coming out of college is probably because you met the right people in college to be able to get on to that. And I suppose long term, if you build the right type of connections and these people continue to have pull and remember you, they can help you later on. There's certainly value. I'm not negating the value, but if you enter it without recognizing where the value lies, I think it can be a mistake. And there's a lot of people that have that story where they have big student loan debt for courses and degrees never completed. And I understand that's a situation for a lot of people. I did get my degree when I went and was pretty focused on getting it. And about a semester or two away from graduating, I finally realized that GPA shouldn't matter. It's just about learning, and which is such a late time in my education career to learn what my purpose of actually going to a school was. But I'd imagine that I'm not the only person that never really had my priorities straight in that setting.
Well, you could go back to school now.
I've thought about it, but I also can keep learning. You can take free online courses, and all I'm really missing is maybe the interaction with a professor, which I don't know how frequent that is anyhow in some of these classes. And at the end of it, having this degree that I can show the world, hey, I learned this, instead of just entering the world having learned it.
Maybe you should go back to school and be a professor at college, like a communications professor.
Maybe, but if I were to take that path, I'd want to be really passionate about it. And at this point, I'm not. If everyone tells me that and they'd say, oh, Curt, you'd be great at it, and then somehow I develop a passion, maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's an idea. I'm not sure that that's something that's going to drive me to get there.
No, I understand that. As people listening to this, you realize that we are brother and sister because we sound alike, but we are actually somewhat alike in a little bit of ways, but somewhat not really alike because we had different, almost seems like we had different childhoods growing up, because a lot of people say somebody was street smart and somebody's book smart. Curt was definitely the book smart guy, and so was Chuck, and I was definitely the street smart girl, I should say, because my grades were definitely not as good as theirs. So I think the expectations of the daughter in the family were different than the expectations of the son.
And we grew up on a farm, and you were the only one that really took to the farming. Chuck had to a lot more because he was the first kid and had to do all that work that was available right away as soon as he's old enough to do it. And then Chuck and I talked when we had our episode. As I got to that age, there was just way less work to do, so I didn't have as much of that to do. I still did some, and I learned from it, but I never had an interest in farming, in part because I think I had a peak emotional experience of being a little kid and Dad being very angry about all these farm things, and the idea of ever wanting to do that for a career left me so young, where it just never was a consideration. Where a lot of people that grew up on farms, even in our, I say neighborhood, but it's not really neighborhood, but kind of, and the part of the rural part of the township or the county, I guess, that we grew up, a lot of the boys, especially, and some of the girls, end up being farmers. That's just kind of a generational thing that if you do it and you like it and you learn it and you keep doing it, and great for all of them that are doing it, but that really left me at a young age, probably because of a negative peak emotional experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite possible. I know that one of the greatest things I learned, besides learning how to work hard on the farm, was negotiating. And I know in my real estate business right now, one of the best things I do really well in real estate is negotiate. And that doesn't mean I'm a big bully or that I'm very passive. I'm just really good at negotiating. And I go back to when I was trying to build my herd milking cows. It was me against all these men trying to buy cattle and selling cattle, and just learning the pricing strategies then of when dairy farming and buying and selling animals basically is the same strategies I use now in helping people buy and sell houses. So I know when people ask me what do you do really well in real estate that's gotten you to where you've gotten really fast? Because in real estate, the average person sells about 4 houses a year, and I sell about 45 a year and have since I've started. And again, it's just learning the tools that I may learn back in the farm that you would think, well, that doesn't compare to real estate at all. But real estate's built on, obviously customer service, but past referrals and people that know who we are and have us help other people. And because I get them good prices on their homes or for their homes, that satisfies them. And because of the skills I used growing up and being a dairy farmer to build my own company, again, building another company, I think that the dairy farming part helped us and helped me very much so in where I'm at today.
Yeah, it was good for me to grow up on the farm. I learned, I do have really tremendous work ethic in some ways, almost addictive.
Yes,
where
addictive.
When I have a goal, with my Uber and Lyft driving, I have these weekly goals that I set for myself and certain goal incentives that those platforms offer. And when I get the idea in my mind that I'm going to get this goal, I end up working a lot of hours those weeks. Between that and my other jobs, I'm Like the most I think I ever did was 85 hours or something between the two, which I know in other fields and careers that sometimes happens, but pretty much all of that was being self-starting. And I have that in me. I've demonstrated it before. It's just, and it's something learned on the farm where there's work that just, it's going to take all day to do. So I was able to do it. Then I use that in college too. I was putting some really long days in because I really can overcommit myself sometimes, but then I do it all kind of amazingly. So I have that to me where I wonder, does everybody have that? Are they willing to put in a 16 or 18 hour day or 20 hour day potentially? And if they do that, do they feel good about it and ready to go the next day where I can do that? And I'd imagine some people it would just make them want to quit everything if they ever had to do that.
Yeah. I'm not saying other people don't have work ethic if you were never a dairy farmer, but definitely that is one of the fields that you learn that you have to have work ethic. You got to keep going because that is your livelihood. And maybe that's a lot of people that are self-employed, that entrepreneurs that build their own business. You've got to put the time in to build your business where, I mean, some jobs you just punch time clock, which is fine as well. Just that's not who I am. I like building business. I like working for myself. I don't like working under somebody necessarily. So,
well, I think it would be my best guess, and I'm probably wrong because I don't really know this, but my best guess would be because as a kid on a farm, there would be those days where it became somewhat normal to start working early and work the entire day, take maybe a break here or there to get a little food in your system, but you'd work all day and like whatever time of the year where there's the most work to do. And then it had to go on for a few days where even though you didn't really like it, there was the satisfaction of being able to do it, which was learned at, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, where if you don't grow up in an environment where maybe your parents need you to work that much sometimes, and you never really do that ever, the first time you have to do it and you're already an adult, if that even happens, maybe it hits you in a way that as a kid, when you see dad working those days and realizing that he is working really, really hard and seeing the value in that, I think it might affect a child differently than if you never experienced that. So it's partly the hard work, but it's also, I think, just the continuous work and the long days as a farmer, a dairy farmer, that I think can make an impact. That if you say it really helps and the people that have hired you saw that and saw like this person can be a good worker, I think it's that you learn it from a young age. It's instilled in you that this can be a part of life and it's okay to have days like this where you work really, really hard.
Right. That was our environment. So when you grow up in that environment, you're just used to it.
Let's turn to the being wrong segment. You touched on it earlier, but Michelle, when you look back at your life, what was something you changed your mind about the most, or something related to that where you can say now that you were wrong?
Right. So like we kind of touched base on a little bit when we were growing up, my parents said, they were like, you don't need to go to college. You should just milk cows. Well, I did go to tech school for a year and then I quit. And then I went back about 10 years later, like we briefly touched on. And maybe that's because I did not want to go to school like ever again. I was like, I'm not going to school. I just did not like it at all. I can't remember why I didn't like it. Probably because I didn't like learning, but I did not want to go to school. I did go back to college, partly because I was out of options because I didn't have any experience doing anything besides milking cows. So either I was going to be a bartender the rest of my life or make minimum type wage and try to work myself out and still not make enough money, or I chose to go back to school. And a little bit of it was to kind of prove to myself that I could do it. And I did very well when I went back to college. And I think the biggest thing I was wrong about is college in itself. And Curt touched base a little bit about what he thinks about it. For me, I believe that not necessarily that you have to go straight out of high school. Maybe you could skip a year, but you should go when you're young because that is the time that you have to meet new people, to experience new things. And yes, you could do that traveling and doing other things. But if you really look at it, and if college costs you $20,000 a year for 4 years and you were able to pay 20,000 of it off. Let's say it was 80,000. While you're working, you still owe 60,000. If you go into the right field where you are excited about it and get a job right out of it, and you don't have a family to have to pay for, and you're on your own, you could pay for that college fairly quickly in the next couple of years after you're out. And if you're only spending 20,000 a year, you could not go to college, work at a job that pays basically minimum wage, and still owe about 20,000. I mean, if you're paying for rent, let's just say $900 a month, I mean, you're racking up $12,000 just in rent, not going to school. I think the experiences that I know that I probably missed out on in my younger years is definitely something I regret and didn't get to experience because I got married at a really young age and decided that at that point, college was really stupid. I don't think college is stupid. I actually think it's something that people need to experience. Yep, some people are still sitting in debt, but they don't have to be sitting in debt. It's just the choices you make that make you in debt, either credit card wise, car wise, home wise, or college wise. I mean, there's lots of things that put you into debt, but you don't have to look at it as college puts you in debt. You can look at it as you are investing in your future.
Two thoughts on that come to mind. One is, for us, we had, I think, pretty good, a healthy mindset towards finances we were raised with that I think must be better than average. That I think we never really spent money foolishly. I don't feel like I did, and none of you or Chuck, we pretty well. So as you say, with the debt that you carry forward, like, it's really important not to be in debt, I think, to us, like super, super, super important to find ways to get rid of that as quick as possible, or maybe that idea isn't instilled in people always, and then that becomes more of a long-term thing to deal with. Of course, I don't know everyone's situation, but I feel like we were raised with a way of really focusing on an importance with that. But the other thought I had was, so you went back to college, but you were about 30 years old when you were there? Mm-hmm. So at that age, the social kind of things that I did experience and I found valuable, did you get much of that being non-traditional student at 30 when most kids were, 20, 21, 22?
No. I mean, I didn't get the social aspect of it, I guess. I didn't get as much networking as I probably could have, because I would have been networking with 20-year-olds, and it wasn't awkward at all. I mean, everyone looked at me as like the adult, and I was like, basically, I don't know, kind of like, I wouldn't say their mom, but like their older sister. And even the professors knew that no matter what, I would do well because of the age I was at. And probably they could tell too, but it was just different. It wasn't the experience that I know I would have had if I did it 10 years younger. And it's okay. Like, I'm fine. I'm glad I went back, and I don't regret going back at all. I do regret not going out of high school to college. I don't know why I was so dead set against it. I'm actually don't remember, but I don't force my kids to go now. They can make their own choice. However, it's a lot of years wasted if you don't go when you're younger, when you have the time to do it and don't have to worry about other commitments.
Did you find, though, by going older, you could relate it to more real world experiences, what you were learning, how you might use it, even though you were going down a career path you never really followed? But as a 19 or 20-year-old, you hadn't had those 10 years of life experience yet, where you're learning these things and you can maybe see at least some of it where it really applies to life, and you can think to what you wish you would have already. You're learning something and you can think, oh, I wish I'd have known that then. But then again, if you're learning it at age 20, you don't know why you might need it and maybe didn't quite learn it the same way, if that makes any sense.
Well, it kind of makes sense. It's just hard to say because I didn't go when I was young and I went when I was older. So there's a few classes I took that I could relate to real world experience, but the other ones were brand new to me. So I don't think it was better for me to go than when I could have went younger and just refused to do it. I know that if I would have stayed on the job path that I was in when I was younger, there was no way to make it to where I was going to go without like a 4-year degree. It wouldn't have been acceptable.
So your final observation is go to college, it's worth it, and do it when you're younger.
Yes, I believe so. And that doesn't mean you have to go to 4-year college. You can go to 2-year college, but you need to have some college experience. Because when I went back and then finally had my 4-year experience, it was still hard to get a job. But if you go younger, you're still young enough to figure out where you're going to go next. But like Curt said earlier, like learn when you're there. I mean, obviously do fun things too, but try to learn, even if it's not the path you're going to be on, like learn what you're going through so that you can use that at least to help you in the other business you're going to be in or the other field.
That's Michelle Carstensen, my sister. Thank you for joining me. I hope this was fun and exciting.
Yes, it was. Thanks for having me, Curt.
Thanks for listening to People I Know Show. If you'd like to contact Michelle with your real estate questions, her website and contact info is all in the episode's show notes. Links are also there for the People I Know Show Facebook and Instagram pages. Please take a few moments to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you might be listening. And if you like the show, please encourage someone new to listen or share your favorite episode on social media. And as always, feel free to email your feedback directly to me, Curt Carstensen, by using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.